Welcome, everyone, to Everyday Therapy, a podcast with the goal of empowering you to become the best version of yourself. We hope to meet you wherever you may be on your journey to mental health and well-being, whether you're just starting out or whether you're well-versed. My name is Christa Overson. I'm a licensed therapist and clinical director, and I'm joined by my co-host, Brett Cushing, also a licensed therapist and clinical director. This is the official podcast of Nystrom & Associates, one of the largest behavioral health companies in the country. If you or someone you love is struggling with their mental health, Nystrom has over 50 clinics with dedicated helpers. Visit us at nystromcounseling.com. For those of you who may be joining us for the first time, Brett and I have been providing mental health services for a combined 25 years. We both currently practice therapy as well as oversee a team of mental health providers at our respective clinics. Well, Brett, I was hoping for a fun fact from you today.
Fun fact.
What's something about you that people don't know that's also appropriate to share with our gigantic audience?
Oh, and appropriate to share. Okay.
You got to dig deep.
I'm going to dig. Well, this is really interesting. It's really fun. It's a fact.
Okay. Love it.
One of the best jobs now, I like working for Nystrom. I enjoyed being a pastor, but one of the best jobs I had was in college.
Okay.
And every weekend, I was working security for rock concerts and sporting events.
Okay.
So I hung out with Michael Jordan.
You did not.
I did. The Michael Jordan. I'm sure he probably talks about me a lot, when he's with people. Just never on TV. Hulk Hogan, hung out with him. Guns N' Roses, Axl Rose, hung out with them for a week while they did a week of MTV videos. This was back in the day.
I feel like, okay, my friend Ashley does this to me where she'll tell me something with a completely straight face that's just completely not true. So I'm like, I'm looking for like this glimmer in your eye are you messing with me?
I am not messing with you, okay?
I have trust issues. Ashley, I'm talking to you.
You're saying this is an incongruent message because you don't have the physique of a security guy. And
no, that's not
I used to, okay? That was a long time ago.
But like, it's not every day. 2 seconds ago before I started recording, you were like, I don't have any fun facts. And now you bust out with this one.
You challenged me to go deeper, so I went deep.
Okay, well, that's amazing. Okay, so Michael Jordan, Guns N' Roses, Hulk Hogan.
I had to be his bodyguard to walk him back to the locker room. And that was hilarious.
That's amazing. Yeah. Oh, my gosh. So you're basically a celebrity this whole time.
By association. Yes.
Just like I'm a doctor by association because my sister is one.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
We should have her on here.
That would be fun.
She's
What
funnier
about you?
than me.
Give me a fun fact.
Oh, a fun fact about me. I'm left-handed.
I didn't even know that. Here, we're sitting across from each other all this time. Okay.
Are you left-handed?
No.
Okay. We would have talked about that already.
Yeah.
Lefties always immediately pointed out, and they're like, another lefty.
I need a support group.
Yes. In fact, I'm the person, like, if I'm out at a restaurant and the server is writing down orders and they're a lefty, I always am like, lefty! And they're probably like, okay. They're like, I'm trying to write things down.
Trying to work here, lady.
Yeah. So, that's my fun fact. Go ahead.
Singing.
Oh, singing.
Yes.
Don't make me sing.
We always refer to this. Yeah, you sing.
I sing in a band. Yes, I do.
Can you name it? Can we say that? Putting you on the spot now.
No, that's okay. I mean, I try to keep my private life.
Ooh, you're setting a boundary. Love that.
Maybe I'll talk about it another time. But I think I just wouldn't want to be mobbed, with paparazzi.
Yeah, understandably. I understand.
But no, it's a cover band. It's super fun. We have a gig tonight, actually.
Oh, fun.
So yeah, I'm sure people could track me down if they really want to.
Yeah.
So, because they have my name.
Yeah, that's true. Well, speaking of fun facts.
Yes.
I don't know how fun it's going to be, but we are going to be dealing with some
We're doing a shift in tone.
Things.
Factual thing. I thought it would be, go ahead, Brett.
Well, no, I'm excited because you're going to be sharing a little bit.
Yes.
We're going to be talking about addiction and a lot of myths about addiction. Yep. And just seems like it never goes away as a problem in our culture.
Right.
And a lot of us are touched by it personally. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I thought I would start off by sharing a bit of a personal connection that I have to addiction, in that I have a relative who has struggled with addiction for many years, a cousin, and I wanted to just sort of go over his story because I think it's a good example that could potentially highlight some of these myths that we're going to be talking about. I guess to kind of set the scene, this person is, grew up in a family with 3 siblings, parents divorced, just to give like some background. His mother was, I think, undiagnosed bipolar disorder. And undiagnosed as in like it was in a time, a few decades ago where they were just prescribing Valium for people, which I think is what, a benzodiazepine or a painkiller for people for any sort of nerves, mental health issues. And so, but in hearing this cousin describe it, there were clear manic episodes and there were clear depressive episodes. And this, so this cousin kind of grew up in Minnesota here and is an incredibly gifted artist. So we're talking illustrations, we're talking music, gorgeous voice, and actually went on to study acting and became, kind of actually moved out east to New York to become an actor and was in some, pretty well-known productions. So this was kind of the early life. So
very talented person.
Very talented person. And this cousin is older than me. So when I was growing up, I was interacting not very often with him, but I saw him as this, I would tell my friends, did you know my cousin is this actor, in New York? Wow. You know what I mean? Yeah. But I never knew kind of what was going on. So I never saw, I knew that this person was in and out of my life and in and out of our family's life, but I didn't know much else. And that he was very talented, right? So come to find out, I don't remember exactly when, that he was struggling probably since early 20s with an addiction to methamphetamine. And I can't remember how I found this out, but it sort of explained it sort of explained the sporadic contact. And then I started hearing some stories about how, he would call up relatives asking for money, and he would, accept help from people. And he still lived out of state at this time. Right. And he would, say oh, I'm going to come visit. And, we even had a couple deaths in the family. And, he was yeah, I'm getting on the plane, I'll be there. And never would show up. And eventually I would see him sort of burn bridges with almost every single person in the family. Because
and you never saw him being high.
Correct. Well, not that I knew of. Right. Because I would see him once in a while at holidays. And I didn't notice, I had no idea. I didn't notice anything off about him. With booze, you can sometimes smell it, or the person's falling down or whatever, but no, nothing. The only kind of clues I had were just this sporadic, I'm here, I'm there, I'm not there, and then making promises and not following through. And then I started hearing, again, I'm growing up and getting older, and I'm kind of catching on to more things. And maybe even because of my training, I'm starting to realize okay, so he would, call and ask for money, and then if the person wouldn't help him, he would become extremely angry and abusive and swearing and all these, again, just stories I hear, right? So again, I'm telling by secondhand almost, because I never had this interaction with him. So point being, and so the interesting part too is in my family, it's all just sort of these stories, including even current status. You know what I mean? Where is he now? I've heard he's living in the area. I've heard he's sober. I've heard he continues to struggle with kind of getting back on track. He's no longer doing acting. So and he sort of recently had an opportunity actually to do kind of a fairly big acting gig that sort of fell through. So again, I don't know why. So anyway, so that's kind of the overview. And
as I listen to you, I hear a lot of I don't know.
Exactly.
I don't know. And a lot of kind of puzzle pieces.
Exactly.
You know what this person looks like, but there's all these different puzzle pieces that you put together that really develops this picture of the person. But I don't have all the pieces of this puzzle. Some of them really don't seem to fit. What is this all about?
Exactly.
It doesn't look like the person who's on Skid Row, that's just so obviously having an addiction.
Yes, exactly. Well, and even as far back as I can remember, like, he would have like a TV appearance. He had a little cameo in a movie. Like, so it was like no signs out externally of anything amiss. Right? In fact, he's a very put together person.
Yes.
Right? You never know.
What I think I'm hearing is I didn't know. And I think it captures where a lot of people are with a loved one, someone they know who has an addiction to meth or to alcohol or to gambling or you name it.
Yep.
We have these images and we have all these myths of what it looks like.
Exactly.
And so with that, those myths are these expectations. And then oftentimes in reality, someone has an addiction, doesn't fit those expectations, so we miss it. But yet we don't understand. And when we don't understand, we're confused, we're let down, we get angry because none of these pieces are seeming to fit, and we don't even think addiction.
Exactly. Yep. It just shows that you can... So... Another piece too is I think with addiction you can sustain it for a pretty long time,
right? Before
you actually reach a point of needing help or wanting help, right?
Right.
Especially when, by all appearances, you're holding a job, And again, over the years, I would hear these different, like you said, puzzle pieces or kind of I don't knows in my family about, is he working? Is he?
Right.
How's he doing? Like. Oh, he's doing this now. He's over in this state now. Like,
right.
Kind of, but again, always, kind of making ends meet and making it happen.
Right. Whereas conversely, my story told you a little bit about my great uncle. He died, and where he died was rather fascinating because he was an alcoholic.
Okay.
And he was in a bar. He had his arm around some gal, had a cigar in that hand. He had a thing of scotch in his other hand.
Yep.
While his soon-to-be ex-wife is meeting with a divorce attorney somewhere else in the bar.
Yep.
And it was, boom, right there at the bar that he died. And you sort of look at that and say, well, clearly... alcoholic. There's an addiction there,
Sure,
and so that fit the mold, so to speak.
Yep.
Whereas yours, very much an addiction, very serious, light years apart in the characterization.
Yes, exactly. Which I think is, I don't know if you were going to speak to this myth, but like one of the myths I think of addiction is that it's going to be blatantly obvious if it's that much of a problem.
Yes.
And it's just not. Right.
And it's funny because I think you're exactly right. And then when people sort of understand, my experience is there's sort of this exhale of, now it all makes sense.
Yes.
And it's not that people condone it and say, oh, okay, well, now everything's wonderful. But there's almost a relief that, now I get it. It makes sense.
Yep.
But nothing was fitting in my expectation and categorization of what addiction is with this person.
Exactly.
So I think a lot of times too, people look at that and they, speaking of expectations we have, and as we talk about these myths, they're really a lot of times expectations. And another expectation people have is, all right, well then just stop.
Yes, exactly. If it's that much, like if it's getting in your way that much, like quit it.
Right. Just stop. And I think closely related to that, another myth people have or an expectation is that you should be able to just stop. And if you really wanted to, you would stop. So clearly, you don't want to.
Exactly. And so I think that is actually one of the biggest myths, right? And so so we have the myth, which is you should be able to just stop, especially if you want to, right? So what's the truth of that statement? The reality of it? I mean, there's different schools of thought, right?
There are.
Yeah.
Yes. And but I also know this. People want to stop. And in fact, the people that want to stop most are the people that are in the throes of addiction. They they don't want their life to be falling apart. They truly do love their family and their kids. And if there's anybody that really wants to be over the addiction, it's the person who's in the throes of it.
Right.
And yet that doesn't meet our expectation because, just stop then.
Yeah, totally.
It's really hard. It brings up a lot of attention for people.
I think too, another maybe the truth about addiction, I think, is that people underestimate how powerful it can be. So for those, I think in 12-step circles, sometimes they refer to people who don't struggle with an addiction people who don't struggle with an addiction as normies. Have you heard this?
I have, yes.
Yeah. Like, and what that was referring, that's kind of a, term for someone who's quote unquote normal, which I don't believe anyone's really normal, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because it's this thing about some people can have a drink and put it down. And then there's this, group of people where it's like, I can't put it down if I start. Right. And so the willpower piece is like, okay, there's something to be said for willpower, but at the whole, 12-step model is we were powerless over alcohol.
Yes.
Or whatever drug or whatever addiction, right? So I guess that would be maybe the reality is there is willpower. Yes, you can want to stop using drugs and alcohol or whatever the addiction is, and it's much more complicated than that. Right.
It's a mind bender too, I think, for people because people will say to the person who's addicted, you just stop, you need to stop.
Right.
And the person who goes through 12 steps has learned, you're right, I need to stop. I need to stop trying to stop.
There you go. On my own.
Because I can't. If I had the ability to stop, I would have. And so this really underscores that I can't. But that seems so counterintuitive and so irresponsible. I have to actually stop trying.
Sure.
Because the more I try, the more I kind of am in the throes of this.
Right.
So if something's out of my control, the more I try to control something out of my control, it ends up controlling me.
Exactly.
And so I have to stop trying. And I have to start trusting. Well, this is what they would say is in 12 steps, I have to start trusting in a higher power.
Exactly.
And so for people that don't have an addiction, that's just sort of mind-blowing as well. And it's hard for people who have an addiction. Like, what? Stop trying? That seems
that's going to be even worse. Right. Exactly.
Yes. And
then I'm really done for, right?
But it doesn't make any sense to keep trying to do something you have no power or ability over.
Right. Well, I think, too, I guess this can maybe be my last point on this one is I think another piece that might be helpful to highlight is that for the person who is using their drug of choice or their addiction of choice, there is a benefit that is outweighing the perceived cost.
Yes.
So, for example, with my example of the cousin who was using methamphetamine is he was getting enough out of it, and in his mind that was more beneficial than these other costs, right? And now that doesn't mean he doesn't care about these other things, but he's got this whole story in his mind about how maybe, and again, I'm speculating, but okay, but this helps me be energetic on stage. This helps me with the late nights. This helps me to, feel confident. And especially when you're in such a, public facing profession, I'm just, trying to kind of put myself in his shoes. And then when you think about giving that all up, and then with the withdrawal and all the coming down and all that stuff, it's like, well, why wouldn't you keep doing that until you can't anymore?
Right. Yeah. Everything we do because there's some benefit or utility for us. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it.
Exactly.
That's why I don't eat broccoli, because I'm like, well, what's the benefit? I guess there is if I eat healthy. We're going to have to
talk about your addiction to broccoli avoidance.
Well, actually, my addiction to carbs probably and sugar.
No, that's a thing. That's a real thing.
It is. And I think for people that have a hard time understanding, try giving up carbs and sugar. Or caffeine.
As I take a sip of my coffee. Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
So, I think also what's inherent within this is another expectation of rational thinking, of somebody who's addicted. Just, they're not thinking, like they're not sober minded, if you will. And
Sure.
so people who aren't addicted look at them and they have expectations that they're going to be thinking rationally. And so what I find in working with people who have sobered up, so to speak, from whatever drug, I will tell the spouse who hasn't been addicted, like, and the person who is addicted, like, yeah, it's going to take 6 months for this sober-mindedness to begin to take effect.
Well, did you mean to perfectly segue into the next myth? Because this is another myth, is that if you just simply stop using your drug or addiction of choice, that's enough.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
Because I think that's another myth, is that I'm just going to stop using, we'll say in this case, meth, and then I'm good. But you're making the connection about it's a whole thought process, it's a whole mentality.
Absolutely, it
sober-minded.
is. Yeah. And I think what I find is when we are addicted to something, that's created another problem. I have this addiction that is a problem and a very serious problem. But that started because I was coping with some other problems, another problem I had was I wasn't coping well. So people would, I'd get referrals to people who've been sober for 6 months, and then they'd come see me. And they were pretty glad, like, hey, I've been sober 6 months. I'm feeling really good, and I'm happy for them.
Right.
Want to celebrate that with them. But there is this idea of addiction transfer. And so if we're not consciously aware that, hey, I was drinking or I was using this substance to medicate from some other pain in my life, that's more kind of like the glacier under the water. And so was it trauma? A lot of times it's physical, emotional, sexual trauma that we've medicated, or it's anxiety or something. And so we medicate that with a drug, then we get addicted to that. And so, hey, I'm not addicted anymore. I'm sober. Wonderful. Now, let's address beneath the surface. What else? What was really going on? Let's address the trauma now. Let's address the anxiety or whatever it is. And so that's why it is such an important myth.
Well, and you made me realize another piece of that is that, remember a bit ago I was talking about the mental health history in the family of, undiagnosed bipolar disorder and different things. And so another piece is that a drug or alcohol addiction can be an attempt to treat an undiagnosed mental health condition, right?
Can you give an example of that?
Yes, absolutely. So, we can just, to use this example would be if you're experiencing clinical depression, and what are the symptoms of that? Low motivation, low mood, feeling hopeless, right? Now you introduce a stimulant like meth, and it gives you high mood, it gives you motivation, it gives you euphoria, right? Confidence. And so it's like, I'm using air quotes, what a perfect solution to this problem, right? And I think that's, again, it can be such a powerful hook, right? Of like, I'm solving this problem.
There's the utility, there's the benefit. Same with, I think of pain addiction to painkillers. Because, hey, who wants to feel pain if I can take these pills? And that's extremely hard to come off of. But who wants to go back to feeling miserable again?
Well, did I ever tell you, I don't know to pick on us with our sugar and carb addiction, I'm a self-professed, right? Sweet tooth and sugar addict. And sugar has an analgesic effect, like Tylenol or ibuprofen. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
so
it makes crazy sense,
right?
Now that I think about this.
I know, doesn't it? So it's like, but again, unconsciously, I may not even realize what's happening, but I'm reaching for something that my body knows is going to relieve some of my pain and tension. And, there's dopamine, so it's pleasurable and it's all that.
And I think that highlights also what happens to addiction that we don't even understand a lot, which is I take sugar, right? Let's just
take sugar.
Very pedestrian about this and say I take sugar because it has this analgesic effect. And what does sugar lead to? Well, dopamine. I can feel the dopamine being released. But also it leads to inflammation in the body. So now I
Right.
have more pain. Oh, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because my brain says, I got the solution.
Exactly.
And so I'm just going to take more sugar. And I'm taking more sugar, and it leads to more inflammation. Now, a lot of people don't realize this is the same dynamic with marijuana. Because marijuana can reduce anxiety. And my anxiety, let's say, is at a 3.
Yep.
But my anxiety continues to go up as I'm taking marijuana. But hey,
Totally.
it's okay. I know what to do. I'm just going to
Take more.
take more.
Exactly.
But over time, my baseline of anxiety, very subtly and very
Right.
realistically, will go from 3 to 5.
Yep.
But I can take
Yep.
marijuana. And so glad we kind of highlighted that myth too.
Exactly. I think another myth, so staying on the sugar topic, is you have to hit rock bottom before you can get better.
Yeah.
Is that, so that's a myth, right?
Well, it is. And it isn't. I think that's why it's
let's
such
talk
a
about
difficult one. Yes.
Exactly. Let's talk about what is meant by rock bottom. I mean, I think most people know, but I don't know. So the term hitting rock bottom is like when your addiction has so consumed your life that you have nothing left. Like you have no other option. We're talking, you've lost your house, you've lost your car, you've lost your loved ones. You have nothing.
Yeah.
To basically, you've realized the benefits are no longer there, and the costs have stacked up so high that you're looking at,
Right.
It's up to the ceiling. So, right?
That's rock bottom.
That's rock bottom. So the myth then is that, I think this is kind of controversial, right? Because there's people that say like, that's what you have to get to. And then there's others who would say, no, you absolutely don't have to hit rock bottom before you can get better. What do you think?
I think it's a both and. I think some people have to hit rock bottom, and that's very true. Some people still hit rock bottom and they still don't get help either. And some people, they seek treatment earlier. And that's fantastic. I actually was doing therapy with somebody just recently, and he was concerned because there's a history of addiction, and he noticed he was drinking a lot, and he really got ahead of it.
Yeah.
And it was just much easier to turn that around as we were. It was more like prepare than repair. So you don't always have to hit that, I don't believe.
Sure. Well, and I've actually seen in my own family, and then, clients I've worked with, where it's like they know the odds are stacked against them because of their family history.
Right.
And I've even had friends who have said, like, you know what, I don't drink, not because I've ever personally had a problem with it, but because I come from 18 generations of alcoholism.
Yes.
And so, and in their wisdom, they're kind of like, I've just decided that this is not for me.
Yes.
Right. And so I think that's another example of, it's a personal, you can make that choice to refrain or whatever, abstain from.
Yeah, that's an excellent point.
Now, I'm not saying that, most people do that. I think that's more rare.
Right.
But,
yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up about hitting rock bottom, because that speaks to expectations too. I know we're getting short on time, but I think of another one that's really relevant for people, and that is for those who are trying to help somebody, and that is I have to help them. I can help them, and I have to help them. And so I've seen this where people have a loved one, maybe an adult child, and who's had meth addiction, and like, no, we're going to help this person, and we're going to help our child, even though it's an adult child. And I've had to say, you can't.
Yeah.
And it's hard. Every time I say that, it's really hard, because as a parent, there isn't anything I wouldn't do for my kids.
Of course.
But that's just it. There isn't anything I wouldn't do, but there's nothing I can do in that situation. There's nothing we can do. And that's really hard too. That's a very similar kind of dynamic where I'm confronted with my own powerlessness to help this person. Right. And it seems very irresponsible to say, no, you can't stay here anymore. And because it feels like you're kicking your child out. You're throwing them into deeper addiction. And in reality, if you don't, their addiction will spill over into your lives, and it'll just ruin your life, ruin your existing marriage. And there's so much more we could say, but I just wanted to highlight it quickly.
I'm glad you said that. Actually, I want to mention a couple things, but I think if you're curious about addiction as a family disease, as a family process, check out the show Intervention. I believe it's on, what is it on? Not Lifetime. It's on, it's going to bug me.
Television.
It's on television, but you can Google it. And it basically shows the process by which a family with a addicted, family member sets boundaries on this individual's behavior and their lifestyle to prevent it spilling into the rest of their lives. And the person basically has to get help.
Yes.
So they say, we're not going to keep paying for your rent. We're not going to keep buying you groceries. We're not going to keep doing all these things if you don't get help. Right.
Yes.
And so typically you see it be actually very successful. So I would say, look, check that out. The other thing I wanted to just highlight is Nystrom and Associates actually has a lot of substance use disorder treatment. And I think the best way to get started with that is the easy peasy nystromcounseling.com. If you go to their services, there's all sorts of information about what Nystrom can provide, but it typically will start off with a assessment. So a substance use assessment by a licensed drug and alcohol counselor is your best bet for getting started. There's also some groups that happen. So there's a group in Bloomington at the Bloomington Clinic on Mondays. It's in person. It's for adults 18 and older. And it's for anyone who has a mental health and addiction problem. So if you have depression and alcoholism or, it's kind of and I actually co-lead that with another therapist. So I would just say, give us a call at Bloomington. Again, you can find us on the website and you would do an intake and you don't have to be in treatment and you don't have to be doing formal substance use disorder treatment. So I just wanted to highlight that. Great. Yeah.
I'll add just a couple other things too for those who might be out of state, overseas, other galaxies, listening to this podcast. That you can look at and just Google 12 steps. There's 12 steps for pretty much any kind of addiction. And so you could look up 12-step program for meth or for narcotics or sexaholism. And you can find 12-step programs for that. You can find, for those of you who are with somebody who's suffering, you can look at Al-Anon and learn a lot about what it is to be someone that's suffering with someone who has an addiction. Also, there's churches do this too. There's different programs. There's Celebrate Recovery is a very popular one throughout the country. My church. We do something called Regeneration or Regen, and I help lead that.
Amazing.
And, it's 12-step. And God, Jesus Christ is the higher power there specifically. But there are so many resources out there for people, and we are so glad we could talk and highlight this a little bit. And we'll be talking more and more about that and bringing in people from our company to talk more about this.
Right. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but you are absolutely not alone. If you are struggling with a drug or alcohol or some other sort of addiction, there's help. It's not too late. It's never too late. There's people who love you and care about you. So I would encourage you to take that next step. And maybe if you're worried about someone, pass along this podcast or some information. Anyways, it's been our privilege to talk with you today on Everyday Therapy. We'll catch you on the next one.